Pikmin 3 is the latest real-time strategy game in the Pikmin series from Nintendo, a family-friendly series about astronauts visiting Earth billions of years into the future after everyone's dead and long gone.
Or so we think.
Jared, what did you think of the Pikmin 3?
The Pikmin 3, I think it's been a long time coming, going from a launch game until, 6 months, 8 months down the track. But I'm glad it's here. Pikmin 3, for me, was probably a suitable successor to Pikmin 2, but I did have a few flaws with it. What do you think?
I, for the most part, enjoyed Pokemon 3. I thought that the actual concept was well done, as it has been in the past. However, I had some problems with some of the new features they introduced, and with the length of the game, but we'll get into that later. Jared, what were some of the positives with Pikmin 3?
With Pikmin 3. Well, I think with Nintendo, one of the things they're very good at is refining their level progression and their pacing, and I think that's where Pikmin 3 really stands out above, everything else on the market. They pace their levels really well in terms of integrating boss encounters and enemy encounters and puzzles, so it doesn't retread itself too often. And with Pikmin 3, they introduced the flying and rock Pikmin at the expense of the white and purple Pikmin, and they're smartly integrated into the actual puzzles and the way that you defeat the enemies. They feel like they're, an integral part of progression through the game world and not just an unnecessary burden to your Pikmin army.
Well, I like the idea of Pikmin, of this sort of tiny world beneath our feet where all these astronauts and Pikmin are running about. But unfortunately for me, the game sort of shares that microcosmic feeling. And there's only about 5 levels, and one of them is essentially just purely for a boss. And it can take you under 10 hours to finish the game. And the point at which the main storyline ends makes it feel like it's just warming up. So for me, the game's just far too short for me to really get into it. I understand that it's all about exploration and finding fruit to take back to your home planet, but for me, the game's just far too short for what it should be on a next-gen system.
The length doesn't really bother me. I don't think being on a next-gen system justifies expanding production costs and making a bigger game just for the sake of it. I do think that there's maybe a little bit of a clash there in terms of creating this campaign that obviously is somewhat story-driven and scenario-driven, but at the same time, Pikmin kind of emphasizes this arcade quality. You are supposed to replay it, you're supposed to refine your skills and speed up your progression through the level, and if you're someone who just wants to play the campaign through one sitting, then yeah, it's pretty short. I think I finished it in about 7 hours or something like that.
Yeah, look, I finished it in 8 hours, so I probably, was just less good at Pikmin than you were.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, that's fine. Look, I thought overall it's enjoyable, but there are some more specific technical issues I had problems with as well. I'm going to be the negative voice in this review. I thought the pathfinding was very spotty. I thought when you're trailing behind 100 Pikmin, often they'll get caught on corners, and they won't know how to get around them, and you'll have to either go back for them, or if you haven't noticed, then they'll just sit there and die at the end of the day. The game is divided up into days, and you only have 24 hours, I suppose, of in-game time where you're supposed to do all the tasks you want.
Yeah.
Collect all your Pikmin, collect all the fruit you can, or complete whatever objectives you need to complete before you have to return to space, and whatever Pikmin are left behind die. And often there'll be a few Pikmin who've been caught on some object at the end of the day, and you have no idea where they are because you didn't notice them leave the party, and you'll never get them back. It's obviously you have hundreds of Pikmin at your disposal, so most of the time it isn't a problem, but sometimes if it's a specific type of Pikmin you're short on, for instance, I always found I had very few yellow Pikmin, it can get very annoying.
Yeah, you can always hunt them back down because the map will always show you the location of every single Pikmin in the game.
They're very small dots, very small yellow or black dots, yeah.
No, they're pretty bright and flashing for me. But I definitely did have the pathfinding issue. I only lost probably about 20 maybe through the pathfinding throughout the course of the game. I can understand why they have a speed system. The more bloomed Pikmin is, the faster they are and the more efficient they are. But there were at times, ants always follow a single path. In Pikmin, if a Pikmin trails too far behind, they will get caught in the environment. They'll wander off into these bizarro directions. I guess maybe they wanted you to slow down your pace of playing to kind of make you micromanage everything, but it does slow down the game a little bit.
It also makes dodging very hazardous, because it's a dodge move where you can quickly dodge left or right, and the Pikmin trail behind with this move as well, so you can try and dodge to avoid an attack from one of the bosses. but you'll find half your party getting squashed by it nonetheless.
I probably used that move about twice during the game, if that.
Yeah. Well, the bosses are something else we should talk about. There's only about 3 or 4 in the game in total.
No, there's 5. There's one for each level.
I'm just forgetting a few, am I?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, the worst one is there's a worm, which...
the gigantic phallic worm.
That's right. It's tough to figure out, and even once you do, he takes a lot of punishment. The bosses are supposed to be... I got the impression they're supposed to be defeated over a series of days. Like, you're supposed to chip away at their health, go away for a day, come back. And I suppose you could do it within a day, but they're designed for very long, drawn-out battles.
I probably had a more positive experience with them. I beat each one in about a day, if that. Maybe 2 at most. The worm was definitely the one I had the most problem with because I didn't feel it communicated exactly how I was supposed to defeat it early on, though maybe that was just my idiocy. The other bosses, though, I felt were very similar to the way Nintendo designs the Metroid and Zelda series, in that each stage you enter will have a theme, a particular Pikmin or a particular puzzle, and when you get to the boss fight, you know that particular Pikmin will be integral to defeating the boss. I mean, the simplest early example is the first centipede that's armored or whatever it is. You get the rock Pikmin in the very first stage, and you get the fire Pikmin, and that's obviously the way to defeat it. You have to use the rock Pikmin to crush its shell. And every single level follows a similar pattern, and I thought that was well communicated. You know, you get the flying Pikmin, the boss is going to use the flying Pikmin as a weak point.
Well, finally, just to bring this discussion to a close, we should talk about the new 3-character system that's in Pikmin 3. Yeah. Put into the game seemingly only for the reason because this is Pikmin 3, and something to do with 3 has to be in the game. The 3-character system also is meant to make your workflow easier as you switch between 3 groups, as well as giving you the ability to access hard-to-reach places. But the mechanic where you throw your crewmates isn't used that often, and I found that, you know, since you can't automate your crewmates' actions, the only thing you can do is tell them to go someplace. I didn't really find myself switching between my crewmates that often. Like, there's no point to having one large party or just 3 smaller ones usually.
Yeah, I think, you know, Pikmin 2 brought in the dual party mechanic. This brings in the 3-party, and it is largely completely unused. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 optional fruit quests that use it, and they use it pretty well in terms of just throwing your opponent or throwing your party member somewhere to reach a higher up area. But throughout the game, it's not really used. You can actually cheese through most of the game with just 1 party. I think the particular example that was the last boss, which really emphasizes that you're supposed to split up your party for efficient workflow. I think I did it all with just 1 party, but on the same time, we're seeing, like, on the internet, people are doing really efficient runs with multiple parties. I think the touchpad is actually quite good for sending parties to different places, allowing you to really quickly switch between each one for more precise control. And I can imagine that getting through levels and collecting 100% of fruit using the 3-party system probably could knock down the time. And for masters who really want to refine their skills and break records, I think the 3-party system probably would work pretty well.
Did you play the game using the control pad or using the remote?
I swapped between them. I started with the control pad, started using the Wii remote until the batteries ran out, and then finished it off with the gamepad. If you're going to play Pikmin 3, you definitely should be playing it with the Wii remote. Similar to Pikmin 1 and 2 when they were brought to the Wii, the pointer really is a huge advantage over being stuck with an analog stick. And I thought actually having the gamepad and the Wii remote together as a controller worked pretty well, as I often was looking down at the gamepad to find the location of stray Pikmin and sending other parties to different areas and that kind of thing.
Do you think there's perhaps a missed opportunity there where they could have used the touchpad, you know, to aim your Pikmin, you know, using the pen? I thought that seemed like an obvious, you know, mechanic they could have integrated, but
in a way,
it
yeah.
uses the analog
I
stick,
think, you know, in terms
version.
of trying to sell the gamepad as something very unique, Pikmin doesn't do a very good job of it. But at the same time, again, because of the way Pikmin 2 and Pikmin 1 played on the Wii, I think this is an example of one of those games where the pointer really brings so much to the table. I wouldn't have been happy if they'd removed it. You'd probably have to redesign the game in really significant ways to make the touch mechanic more efficient. Yeah, like when Miyamoto was demonstrating it, he pretty much always used the Wii remote, which says enough. It won't sell you on the gamepad, but I did think it controlled well with both the gamepad and the Wii remote in tandem.
Do you just do everything you see Shigeru Miyamoto do?
Yes. I copy him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so overall, it seems that you liked Pick and Mix 3 more than I did.
I did.
but we'll have to come to a consensus on a score. So it appears that somehow we're going to give this game, Pikmin 3, 4 out of 5 stars. For more news and reviews on games similar to Pikmin 3, please head to rocketchainsaw.com.au.